Thank you very much. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the latest in the Abstract 45 series. My name is Professor Jim Bow. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Design, Informatics and Business, and I'm here to introduce Professor Annelize McKay. Annelize joined McKay about 5 years ago, and obviously I got to know her through our professoriate meetings, various other interactions. But it was only really when we went through a bit of an internal restructuring that I got to know her much better, just from around 8-9 months ago. What really impressed me was that Annelize can always be relied on to act with intelligence and integrity in everything that she does, which I think is a pretty important character set for someone who's a professor of international law and bioethics. Over the last few months in particular, I've learned a lot about your research as well. So Annelize has a very pivotal role on South African Research Ethics Committee. She's the only lawyer on a large ethics committee that makes decisions about whether or not clinical and healthcare research projects proceed. And those decisions impact millions of people. It's governance of that process. She's also directly contributed her own expertise to new law and policy on the transfer of biological materials across borders in South Africa and beyond. So it's a very, very impressive standard, and I'm very grateful that Abertay has somebody as part of the team with that standing in place. I'm also very much aware of a deep commitment to her colleagues, both within the Dundee Business School and beyond, and also to her students. In law, of course, but Annelize has also contributed to our students in cybersecurity and in computer, sharing her extended expertise that spans multiple domains. It's my privilege to introduce Professor Annelize McKay and her talk, which is entitled The Recalcitrant Chatbot. Of course, I forget the second half. Practice this 4 times. My own negligence. Liability for medical negligence in the age of AI. Annelize.
Thank you, Jim. I hope I live up to this wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone, and I want to say a special welcome not only to my colleagues who are here, who have listened to this talk already and told me to put more pictures in, but much use they were, and my 4th year medical law and bioethics students who are all sitting there and many of whom handed in their dissertations today. So this is a celebration for them. I hope you will keep me right, all of you. So welcome everyone. All right, I have a clicker, so I can actually move on my slides with a clicker if I stop trembling. Only it doesn't work. Okay, let me see that it is, yes, well, no, it is on. Well, I'll just use the mouse. No. It should be, I must just use force. Force, yeah. All right, after that start, I gave a lot of thought on what I will talk about tonight, because it has to be accessible to the public, as this was advertised on social media. It also has to be not only about law, it should be interesting to the computer scientists at the university. So I thought to combine the 2 topics, and I got to this point where I thought I'll talk about chatbots. Someone was very shocked. I said, what, chatbots? But here we go. All right, I'm going to give you a short introduction to my talk. Then I'm going to give you, it's always good to give people an outline at the beginning so that they can see how far along they go in a talk. Especially good if the talk is boring. So then I'm going to talk about AI and healthcare services very briefly, negligence and Scots law. That's why my students are all here, also the second year students sitting over there. And then I'm going to talk about the recalcitrant Canadian chatbot that hangs out on Air Canada's website. And I will talk about a little bit about liability for chatbot errors in healthcare and offer a few potential solutions, which are really still a work in progress. I haven't made up my mind really about it. And then I'm going to offer conclusions and a call to action. And all of this I hope to do within my allocated 45 minutes. Okay, I'm sure Abate people will all recognize that is our very own chatbot. That is Abby. Abby normally has pink underneath it. That's why she looks a little bit strange, different from what she now looks. Or he, I don't know why I should, Abby is, yeah, could be. Anyway, so let's get going with the introduction. Considering that my talk, is about AI, I decided to use AI in my talk. So I asked a mere 3-line quote, a 3-line prompt. I actually asked AI to compose a poem for me on tonight's talk. So here goes. A cautionary ode to clever code for Annelize McKay's Abstract 45 presentation. The bot added that as well. From Pretoria's sun to Dundee's chill air, though today it should be very hot air, Dundee's very hot air, she's come with sharp questions and quite the legal flair. With law, ethics and logic in hand, she's ready to challenge where algorithms stand. The model, you see, is clever and slick. It diagnoses fast, but wriggles out quick. It wasn't me, says the code with a grin. I just guessed your disease from the data you're in. So who takes the blame when machines get it wrong? That's why we're gathered, so listen along. McKay's here to ask with a raised legal brow. I'll try. If no one's responsible, then who's liable now? I think it's quite a good poem. If you consider, yes, well, can't take any credit for it. The robot produced it very quickly, within seconds. So it really is amazing. Okay, so AI systems, as you know, are really integrated into every part of our lives now. It's very hard actually to get away from AI. When I just Google something, immediately I have an answer given to me by AI. So it's very hard to get away from it. Also, we are using AI in healthcare and healthcare decision making. And we use chatbots to give patients advice. And that raises important questions and challenges. Because there's always the chance of error, and the question always will be, who takes responsibility if the AI fails to perform as was expected, or worse, if the AI actually does harm? So I'm going to use Canadian and UK case law and the current Scottish legal framework and examples of emerging AI technologies used in healthcare to tell you a bit about the problems. And I'm going to conclude with a question. Are we in need of new laws, new strategies, new standards? And I hope to also offer you my thoughts on life, the universe, and everything, which is those of you who are as old as I am, it is a literary, I was not looking at you, Ken. It is a deep literary reference. Okay, so let's start with AI in healthcare services. If we have to use or arrive at a definition of AI, I use the one from the Artificial Intelligence Act of April 2024 of the European Parliament and Council. AI system means a machine-based system that is designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy and that may exhibit adaptiveness after deployment, and that, for explicit or implicit objectives, infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. That last bit, I think, is the most important in this definition. The idea that it can influence physical and virtual environments, and that is what I'm going to talk about tonight or this afternoon. So we are using AI at the moment in healthcare services. We use virtual health assistance and decision-making support systems. We use AI in diagnostics, and we have AI-powered chatbots providing patient advice and answering medical queries. If you look at the right of my slide, you'll see that is NHS Scotland's chatbot, the invitation chat with us. Of course, this brings, as I've said, benefits and challenges. Of course, you have increased accessibility. You can ask questions 24 hours a day. You don't have to worry about making an appointment with your GP. But, so it's very efficient, but it is not necessarily all good news, because there could be errors in diagnosis, as we have had. We have often reliance on flawed algorithms. There's a possibility of bias in the data that the robots or the algorithm was trained on, the chatbot was trained on. And there are, of course, data privacy concerns. That is mere. When you reach a certain age in Scotland, I won't say what it is, you have to go for a breast scan, an X-ray, to detect early detection of cancer, which is a very laudable move, public health move by the Scottish government. And mostly nowadays, they're busy rolling it out across Scotland, across the UK. No human radiologist's eye will ever clap or will ever happen upon your naked breast, which is a very, very, you never thought I'll talk about breasts in my, in my talk tonight. But it's a very comforting thought to me that my breasts, in fact, will be examined almost entirely by a robot. The NHS uses MIA by Kieran Medical, which is an automated AI detection of breast cancer. It does it within seconds, and it is much more accurate, they say, than the human eye. So they catch cancer much faster, much more efficiently than humans do. So that is, I think, a wonderful, I'm in awe at such a development. Okay, so let's look at negligence in Scots law, and that's why all those students are sitting there. They're going to judge me. All right, so in Scots law, for negligence to be established, and now I'm talking specifically about a healthcare context in medical law, 3 things need to be proved by the pursuer. That the healthcare professional owed the patient a duty of care, then that the healthcare professional breached that duty of care by either acting or failing to act, and that the breach of the duty of care caused legally and factually the patient harm or loss. So those are, and I promise there's not that much law in my talk. So I see lots of computer scientists sitting there at the back. It's not going to be just law, I promise. Okay, so that there was a duty of care, that it was breached, that it was negligent. Very few healthcare professionals breach their duty of care on purpose, and that breaching caused the patient harm or loss. Okay, so it's really often very difficult in any healthcare setting where there has been negligence to actually establish who is to blame. It's a very difficult matter. If you think about, for instance, a patient on an operating theatre, your patient is asleep. If there's unexpected bleeding, then it's very difficult to decide which of the surgeons, the anaesthetist, who was responsible for this. So it is a difficult matter anyway, already, usually in medical law, to establish who is at fault. So if you should suffer harm, you would claim either against the GP or against the health authority, which is the NHS, and they would have insurance for this eventuality that likely will pay out to make good your damages. This has financial and, of course, reputational damage consequences for the healthcare professionals, because the NHS is spending a lot of money on paying out claims because of negligence. So it's really important, and it's getting very serious. It's huge amounts of money. So it's a large problem. And then, of course, for the patients, they suffer the loss. So it is a problem if something like that occurs. Of course, also, as chatbots generally are consumer-facing tools, we would also probably be able to apply consumer law to a situation of a chatbot, but that is not my focus tonight. For that, we'll ask Nicholas or someone to give us another talk. He's hiding. Yes, there's already takers, I heard. Okay, let's talk about the recalcitrant Canadian chatbot. And you can see I have the Canadian flag up. Okay, so, and now we zooming in on chatbots. They are computer programs designed. This I got from the Cambridge Dictionary. Computer program designed to have a conversation with a human being, usually over the internet. I've never heard of any chatbot that didn't have this conversation over the internet. So I don't know what usually is doing in that sentence, but that's probably them being over-inclusive. So it's a combination, I think, of the word chat and robot, chatbot, and where human language gets inputted, that gets processed by the program, and then in human language you get an answer. So there are different types of chatbots. Some chatbots have a very specific ring-fenced area of information that they can draw upon to give you your answer. And then there are also chatbots that actually can go wild and go out into the rest of the internet to look for the answer. So there are those two different types, and the safer one, I can assure you, is the first, where the chatbot is ring-fenced. Now, Air Canada's chatbot was, in fact, ring-fenced. So it should have been very safe, in theory. Oh yes, I was going to give you examples, but I'm sure everybody knows what a chatbot is. But Siri is a chatbot, Alexa, all those pop-up messages the moment you're on a website. How can we help you today? And that is also on Abbott's website. There is Abby saying to us, how can they help you today. Okay. All right, so our Canadian chatbot hangs out on Air Canada's website. And the chatbot is perfectly ring-fenced. It can draw only upon a certain frame of information. So Mr. Moffat, the claimant in this case, had his grandmother die. I must be careful where I stand because I was instructed not to move beyond the plugs. So that's why I'm nervously staring behind me at the plugs to make sure I'm not beyond the plugs. Thank you. So I just got a thumbs up that I'm keeping within my frame. So Mr. Moffat had his grandmother die. Air Canada offers so-called bereavement fares. If you have to fly because of the death of a close family member, Air Canada gives you a discount, quite a considerable discount in this case. So Air Canada will then discount your ticket. So Mr. Moffat, wanting to make use of this, then started chatting with the chatbot hanging out on Air Canada's website. The recalcitrant one, or the wayward one, I can also call it. So Mr. Moffat asked the chatbot, said, my grandmother died, I want to make use of your reduced airfares. The chatbot said yes, of course, and gave information, and Moffat asked, and fortunately Moffat took screenshots of his conversation with the chatbot. Moffat asked, do I have to apply now or can I claim the money back afterwards? Yes, said the chatbot. You have 90 days to claim back your money, and included a hyperlink at the end of the sentence which had the real bereavement policy at the end of it. Of course, the chatbot was lying. Moffat had to have, before he bought his ticket, he had to have actually booked it through the bereavement policy. He could not claim it back. So Moffat, duly within the 90 days, as the robot specified, he said, I want my $1,000. And Air Canada said no. Now, if your southern neighbour is threatening to make you its 51st state, I really think you have better things to worry about than $1,000. Nevertheless, I've just realised my Canadian family is also listening to this. Okay, so one really would have thought that Air Canada wouldn't defend this. They would just pay the money. I'm sure they spent more on their lawyers than actually the $1,000. So they decided, I think they were worried about subsequent claims. Who knows? So they bravely defended this claim. So Moffat went to, let me just, that is, on the screen is the little spiel, that the chatbot gave Moffat. Air Canada offers reduced bereavement fares if you need to travel. It goes on. And this is what Moffat then had in his screenshot. Clever Mr. Moffat. So he went to a kind of small claims court, a civil resolution tribunal, to claim he's just under $1,000 back. And the question to the tribunal was whether the requirements for the tort of negligent misrepresentation had been met. Now, tort, They got it from English law. It's the same as our dialect in Scots law. I see Christian just nodded his head. So I'm still on the right track. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not making fun of you. I'm so nervous I could forget this. All right. So the question was whether the elements, the requirements for a successful claim had been met. So, and they have named torts in Canada, and the specific tort was negligent misrepresentation. And there, if you look at these requirements, very much the same as Scottish law of dialect. So duty of care owed, the same as our duty of care, an untruthful, inaccurate, or otherwise misleading statement, negligence, reasonable reliance on the statement by the claimant, and then resulting damage. Very much like what I told you about medical negligence, the requirements in Scots law. Okay, so the tribunal found for Moffat. That was not, I'm sure they didn't think about it very long. They said that there was certainly a duty of care owed. Air Canada, of course, argued that the chatbot was a separate legal entity. We didn't do it. It was our chatbot that did it, and our chatbot is provided to us by a separate company, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with Air Canada, what the chatbot says. Really? It hangs out on your website. The presiding officer quickly reminded Air Canada. It's not like it's this random chatbot walking down the street. No, this chatbot is sitting on your website. So yes, Air Canada, we can expect that you are actually responsible for what the chatbot said. Okay, so that was the first one. Then Air Canada admitted, they said it was misleading, the statement. Negligence was also proven. The court said Air Canada did not take reasonable care to ensure that its chatbot was accurate. And there was reasonable reliance on the statement, was reasonable in the circumstances. Air Canada said no, Moffat should have followed the hyperlink embedded at the end of the sentence that the chatbot gave him. I see Ben is already yawning. I hope it was the dissertation. Okay. All right. So, you totally distracted me, but I will get back. Where was I? I was at 4. Yes, Air Canada said that he should have pressed on the hyperlink, and that would have taken him to the real full bereavement policy, and that would actually have told him, no, you have to book this in advance. You can't afterwards claim your money back. And the court said no. If this is a chatbot on Air Canada's website, it is very reasonable to expect that that chatbot is actually telling you the truth. Why would you doubt that the chatbot is actually telling you the truth? And of course, it was very clear that there was damage. Moffat could show that he would not have booked the more expensive fare if he'd not been assured that he would get his money back and that he suffered monetary loss. As I said, it was about $1,000 difference. So that made me think. So I went on a hunt for UK case law, not just Scottish, UK case law, where chatbots, in fact, in a medical context, gave the wrong information. I couldn't find any cases that went to court. Okay, so let's quickly look at what we've now learned from the Canadian example and apply this to our Scottish context. Okay, the question is, who is responsible when AI makes a mistake, such as a wrong diagnosis or misleading advice? So, I suspect that if this should happen in a Scottish context, the possible defences would be, if we rely, or if we look at what happened in Air Canada's case, first of all, the NHS, or whatever, if it's a private healthcare provider, would say, it was the chatbot that acted and not, yes, I know, there people are looking at me with a frown, no. I don't think it will wash either. So the argument will be, it was the chatbot that actually acted, but it would be more subtle than that. Am I still in? Yeah, I'm still in the picture. It would be more subtle. They won't say, yes, it was the chatbot who gave you the wrong advice. They would probably say, we're not liable because we contract the chatbot's programming out to a private company, and they are an independent contractor, and therefore we are not liable for the mistakes they make. So that it would be a much more sophisticated argument that they would make. I don't think they'll get very far with the argument, but never mind for now. So they would try that the chatbot is a separate legal entity provided to them by some independent other company, which is what happens. It isn't far-fetched. And then they could also tell us, or tell the patient, that the patient should have known better, as Air Canada also alleged. The passenger should have known better. The patient should have known better than to follow a chatbot's advice, or should have double-checked the chatbot's advice, as was argued in the case of Air Canada. So I could think that if it's ridiculous advice, if the patient asks, what should I do with my ingrown toenail, and the chatbot says, okay, chop it off, the entire toe, then you can think, okay, one should know better than to follow that. But I don't think it would be that obvious. What if it's misleading advice that is plausible, that's not ridiculous? So that is really what possibly could happen. So there are challenges that the pursuer would face to holding AI accountable. First of all, and I'm now summing up what I've said, the attribution of fault when a chatbot provides the incorrect advice, and of course what is called the black box problem. The fact that we don't know how AI always makes decisions, and the lack of transparency. If you are a pursuer, if you want to institute action, you are going to struggle to try and get to unravel why did the AI make this particular suggestion, give this advice. And then, of course, also the problem of the AI developer versus the healthcare professional or the provider of healthcare, where the question is, who is responsible here for making sure that the chatbot is in fact accurate in its information that it gives? So it really is quite a complex problem. Okay, so as I told you, there were no cases, there's no reported cases of chatbots giving incorrect advice and patients actually acting on the incorrect advice. But we have an interesting UK Supreme Court case, Darnley, the appellant versus Croydon Health Services. I'm going to still fall over this chair before the end of the evening. I can just see this happening, so I'm putting it out of harm's way, well, out of my harm's way. Okay, so the case is Darnley versus Croydon Health Services, and on the right-hand side there's a little picture of the front of the court case. In this case, it wasn't a chatbot, but it was a receptionist in a very busy A&E department who actually gave the wrong advice. So a man suffered a head injury. He and his friend went into the emergency room. He asked, and he said he wasn't feeling very well. He asked how long they would have to wait for him to be seen to. The receptionist said, oh, about 4, you can see how busy we are, 4 to 5 hours. So it turns out that that was totally inaccurate. It wasn't 4 to 5 hours. It was, in fact, 30 minutes. Acting on this advice by the receptionist. Now, remember, she's not a healthcare professional at all. She's the receptionist. There were 2 of them on duty that night. Neither one could remember that they actually had the conversation with him, but he had a friend with him who took him into hospital. He then, thinking, he felt progressively worse, thinking that he's going to have to sit here for 4 to 5 hours. He then left after 19 minutes. He later felt even worse, started projectile vomiting, and banged, he was in bed, banged the wall between his room and his sister's room. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital. It turned out that he had a serious bleeding injury on his brain. It caused, he was then operated upon at about 1 o'clock that morning at the specialist neurology unit, and he suffered permanent brain damage. So he acted, you can see it's the same kind of scenario that I'm sketching for you. He acted on the advice of someone who wasn't a healthcare professional, but appeared to be giving accurate advice. I mean, she was hanging out in the A&E department. If you can't believe the receptionist, then who can you believe? And indeed, the court said, and I'm going to quote here, this is my only reading. Yes, my colleagues, my law colleagues also said, don't read your slides. So I trying my best not to read my slides. So the court held, the duty of the respondent trust must be considered in the round. While it is not the function of reception staff to give wider advice or information in general to patients, it is the duty of the NHS Trust to take care not to provide misinformation to patients, and that duty is not avoided by the misinformation having been provided by reception staff as opposed to medical staff. So even reception staff, a receptionist can hold the NHS liable. So I can extrapolate from that, and I can say that if a chatbot on the NHS's website, when it hangs out there and it gives inaccurate advice, following this case, I think we would be able to hold the NHS liable, because they, if we follow that argument, they should ensure that the correct advice gets given on their website by their chatbots. Okay, I have a case in point, Babylon Health's chatbot. It was supposed to be able to, it was wonderful, the adverts for it were wonderful, well, the advertising material to the NHS by the providers was supposed to be able to triage patients and offer virtual consultations, self-service, frontline and diagnostic service. And it promised huge savings and efficiencies. Of course, it's there 24 hours. It all would be dandy if patients would rely on Babylon Health, the chatbot. However, it turned out to be a complete failure because the chatbot failed to correctly identify illness in a number of cases. it didn't realize that women can also have heart attacks. It thought it was gender-based, that men have heart attacks. So that little problem was a little bit of a problem. It didn't recognize a thrombosis. So it was a failure. The NHS was relatively blasé about it. I don't know if one can say blasé. How many people are there from the NHS in the audience? I hope not many. But it wasn't the NHS that actually terminated their contract with Babylon Health. It was Babylon Health itself that decided not to renew their contract, probably because they were worried about the litigation that would follow based on the chatbot. So the problem is that the chatbot really lacks what humans have. By definition, it lacks what humans have. Because it functions in a very narrow scope. And it could not understand really the vastness of human experience that a real healthcare professional would have. You would have to have a plethora or a coven or a bevy or I don't know what you call the lots of chatbots together, of chatbots to cover all the bases, because AI really lacks, and that's the very important limitation still, it lacks perception, human perception and understanding. Healthcare and the associate areas are built on human perception, interaction and understanding, and also critically in providing care. And that's not something that we can have a chatbot provide. There's a picture for you of Babylon Health. It looks very lovely with someone there anytime to help you. So robots really fail at humanness by definition in those circumstances. Now my scarf has fallen, which will mean my microphone. Okay, it's back. The night has been saved. How long do I have? Ooh, I better rush. Okay. Robots are not humans. They are mere, as I read in an article, someone called them a digital parrot. As a society, I want to ask you the question, are we really starting to place too much reliance on technology and specifically AI? And I want to warn you about this bill before Parliament. Its title is very innocuous, the Data Use and Access Bill. Sounds sort of everyday. But in this bill, which had its second reading in the House of Lords, it's at the moment at the report stage for the law students. At the House of Commons, they expect it to be law probably by September this year. And in this innocuous sounding bill, there is the lifting of the prohibition on automated processing and decision making. What that means, I get very vague looks from people. Okay, what that means is, at the moment, when you apply for a mortgage, when you apply for insurance, car insurance, any insurance, it is AI that does the sifting and your profiling. Even a loan from the bank, that is all AI. It's all done by a computer. But there is still, at the end of it, a human that gives oversight, that looks that the computer program actually did what it was supposed to be doing. This bill lifts it. There is no prohibition. You have to, by law, have a human check the decision that the computer has made. So when the computer says no, a human will check. And this bill lifts that prohibition. In other words, decisions about you and me will 100% be able to be made by AI with no human oversight. I think that is extremely dangerous for us as a society. You see, I said, oh, I'm going to talk about life, the universe, and everything. I'm now getting to that stage. And I haven't had anything to drink, apart from water. So, I think as a society, I was teaching Andrea's computer science master's class, and there was someone, a student in the class from the NHS, and she argued with me. She said, what is the difference? Why would the human make a difference? Aren't computers much more efficient? I agree. They are much more efficient than us, but they lack human compassion, they lack understanding, perception, all those wonderful human qualities that we have. So, just look out for this bill, and if you can put any pressure, I've already written to various people about it, objecting. I do not think that we can trust our decision-making about our lives entirely to AI. So AI certainly can do basic triage when it is very focused and trained for a specific healthcare condition. It works very well when it's clearly trained on decision trees and handling a specific health condition like my breast scan. It's a specific health condition. It looks at breast scans and it identifies cancer. But I don't think at this point it's able to move beyond that, because it needs to be refocused all the time and reinforced. They have a very good AI system that does eye scans at Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital in the ophthalmology unit, and my example of Mia doing breast scans. There, I don't know, the younger people in the audience might have heard about Wobot. It is an online mental health support chatbot aimed at young adults. So instead of having to see a therapist, as you see the advert, I'm here for you 24/7. No couches, no meds, no childhood stuff. Do all psychologists ask you to talk about your childhood? But anyway, they won't ask you. And this chatbot would give you just strategies to improve your mood, plus the occasional dorky joke. It sounds wonderful. I wonder why on the 25th of April it was announced that on 30 June, out of the blue, this chatbot would be terminated. So it is completely terminated on the 30th of June. Once again, I think it is because of fear of possible litigation. Because I do not think a chatbot can actually give human understanding, human perception, and deal with human problems. Would you ask a computer scientist what you should do with your love life? I mean, they're wonderful computer scientists, but they don't necessarily know you. And there they are. I mean, they're just human. So I think I'm about to get myself into deeper and deeper trouble here. But it is basically what is happening. It's a computer programmer who's actually programmed this wonderful Wobot to give you answers. If you see, it's a beautiful picture, that. Look. Arm around her. I'll help you. Yes. Okay, so what are potential solutions? Before people say that I overstay my welcome. Okay, so we can use our existing legal framework And I think I managed to illustrate to you that existing law of delict in Scotland would be able to very well cope with negligent actions by a chatbot. So I think the existing law that we have, the legal system, would at least be able to cope with chatbots. We could develop AI-specific legal frameworks to try and solve this. We could have a system where we could distribute liability among stakeholders. For instance, if we have software developers who developed the AI or the chatbot, then we could have a contractual agreement that they, if there's a problem, that they would fit that part of the bill. There's a long road ahead in this. There was going to be an AI liability directive that was going to be published by the EU. That was pulled in February 2025 because people couldn't agree on what was going to go into the directive. And also, you can think about it, I'm the more cynical person. Also, the lobbying from companies that do AI development must have been quite immense to try and block this directive. We can develop standards for AI accountability by regulatory bodies, setting standards, and we could build into our standards requirements of algorithmic transparency, oversight over training data. All of that we can build in, which will certainly make it much safer. We can develop a set of AI ethical guidelines for healthcare professionals. For instance, what kind of ethical guidelines should AI developers follow? And how can they ensure that their systems are safe and transparent, safe for human use? We can direct the actions of healthcare professionals who use these systems, and we can set up guidelines on how to use AI tools responsibly, because AI as a tool, but not a replacement, is really wonderful and promises great gains. But I believe that at this point, human oversight remains integral. So we can build in guidelines on proper AI use and monitoring by healthcare providers to make it safer. And many people will be delighted. I'm on my second last slide. So there is really immense potential for AI, for the use of AI chatbots. All AI, and specifically chatbots in healthcare. But as I've tried to point out, they lack empathy, intuition, perception, and experience, and those are all intrinsic to human healthcare providers. And the use of AI chatbots really introduces new legal and ethical challenges, and it's crucial for us addressing these challenges to collaborate, that we call for a collaboration between AI technology developers, legal professionals, lawyers have to be there, legal professional and healthcare providers. So it should be a team effort between the AI developers, the lawyers, and the healthcare providers. So I started my presentation this evening with a poem that AI generated for me within seconds with a mere 3-line prompt. I am totally in awe of this amazing tool called AI. I think it is wonderful. But I conclude with a question. How can each of us whether an AI or a chatbot developer, healthcare provider, and there are some healthcare providers on this team's call, lawyers or policymakers, how can we all contribute to a safer future for AI in medicine and in society? I thank you. They're not my students, they are rent-a-crowd.
Thank you very much.